Alright, so shout out to all you guys tuning into Tribe by Noir. And I have a very interesting question that I wanted to ask you guys today. And this question is inspired by a conversation that I had earlier this morning with my training partner. Shout out to you, Mr. Glenn Ford. And the question is, how do you know that you've learned? And this is a very important conversation to have. And it's very interesting because we use the term learn very loosely, right? And so we want to nail it down and qualify what we actually consider to be learning. So on a day-to-day basis, right, we scroll through the news feeds of our social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, whatever else I'm missing, LinkedIn, whatever, right? We Google things, we get a laundry list of all types of articles and whatnot, information everywhere, and we often go through information overload to the point where our brain just starts cutting things out just to narrow things down, to deal with the bombardment. We get a shorter attention span and all type of stuff like that, right? So it would do us well to be more aware of the information that we're consuming and to be more aware of what we qualify as learning. So how do you know that you've learned? Well, when you look at the information that you're consuming, ask yourself, what's the point of this information? What does it change in my life? What is the goal here? Okay, I consume this information and then what? Just because I consume this information, let's say you watched a documentary, right? Maybe a vegan documentary. You know, Earthlings, Forks Over Knives, What the Health, whatever the case, right? And then you finish watching the documentary and you go, wow, yeah, definitely, I didn't know all that. And then what? Do you live your life like normal? Does anything change? Does your behavior change at all? What happens? Right? If nothing changes, that means you haven't learned. Simple as that, right? If you can receive all that information and it translates into nothing for you, you haven't learned. Or at least that information just doesn't have any practical use. But we know that information does have practical use that anyone can use. So if you don't use that information, if it doesn't change anything, you haven't learned. So now you may disagree with me on that. And if you do, well then, what is the point of learning? Answer that question. What is the point of learning? What is the point of consuming information? To do what? How do you know you've learned? Let's go to the example of school. We go to school, we read texts and papers, we memorize paragraphs out of chapters that our teachers told us to read, and then we get a test somewhere down the line. And all those answers that we remembered from the textbooks that we've read, we use that information, we put down the right answers on the test, and we pass with flying colors. Diplomas, degrees, celebrations, yes, graduation cap and gown, boom, we're on our way. And then 3, 5, 10 years down the line, do you still remember that information that got you to pass with those flying colors on that test? So let's think about it. If you've forgotten all that information, you go, oh, algebra? I don't remember half that stuff. Oh, that foreign language that I took in high school? Oh man, I'm so rusty on that, I barely remember. I can't recall any of that. But you passed the test with flying colors, what happened? Right? This is the case with a lot of people. You just forget. So did you remember what you needed to remember, or did you learn? Because they are two different things. Remembering and learning are two different things, believe me. Right? Because believe it or not, it is very, very difficult to unlearn something. Let me prove it to you. Habits. Let's say you learn and pick up a really bad habit. Just try to cut that habit out cold turkey. See how difficult it is. It is very difficult to unlearn something. Let's use, for example, let's say riding a bike. If you've ever learned how to ride a bike in your life, right, and then you didn't have a bike for a few years, do you ever really forget how to ride a bike? I mean, because you know what they say, right? It's like riding a bike. You never really forget. And you can not have ridden a bike in 6-7 years, and you get on a bike and then it's awkward for the first 5 or 10 minutes, and then it's like you never got off because you've learned. You haven't unlearned how to ride a bike. You haven't done it in a while, but you haven't unlearned it, right? That's why when you eat with a spoon, you get your mouth whole every single time, right? The spoon doesn't go up your nose, it doesn't go in your eye and all type of stuff. It goes right in your mouth every single time, or at least it should, right? For the most of us. So, because this is a behavior that we've learned. We've effectively learned this. Riding a bike, we've effectively learned this. The behaviors, the habits that we have are comprised of things that we've effectively learned. It's not just stuff we've memorized. You see what I'm saying? And in order to replace the things that we've learned, we have to replace that with new things that we learn. An example would be cigarette smoking. People try to quit cigarettes. You can't just quit cold turkey and don't replace it with anything else. You need gum, right? Or maybe chew on straws or something. Or a breathing exercise, maybe some meditation. You got to put something in its place. And then you develop a new habit that takes the place of the old one. This is what I mean by learning. This is what qualifies as learning. In a nutshell, learning has to change your behavior. Because what else is the point of learning? Learning implies application, right? Or at least awareness that leads to some other type of behavioral change. So when you watch things like Forks Over Knives and Earthlings and What the Health, some of your habits should change. Your behavior should change. The choices you make should be a little different, if not very different. And this is how you know you've learned. When it changes something in your life, when it's meaningful enough to change your behavior, that's how you know you've learned. So when you watch Remsen's videos and you go, that was very informative. I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing, right? Ask yourself, okay, now, how does it change your life? How does it change your behavior? When I teach you how to squat, when I teach you how to deadlift, when I teach you core exercises or diet, how to structure your meals, all type of stuff like that. When I teach you all of these things, hopefully it should yield a behavioral change. And if it hasn't, it's because you didn't learn a damn thing.
Oh, yeah.